good morning, everyone. It is just about 11 o'clock in the morning on September 22nd, 2019, and we are continuing our comparison of the DT 1990 by Beyerdynamic versus the Sennheiser HD700. One is a true open back headphone, the other is semi-open back, and the semi-open back happens to be the 1990 Pro. Yesterday, we tested the bass response between these two. Today, we are moving forward to the mids test. How did the vocals come out on either of these? Before we get there, let's take a quick look at the manufacturer's website and figure out what they say. So as we know, the 1990 is a 250 ohm headphone, and besides all this marketing mumbo jumbo, what they say is that the 1990 Pro has clear, undistorted sound, right, using the Tesla technology. And they say it has a richly detailed mid-range and precise bass, which combines to ensure a sublime sound quality that is second to none. Okay, well, we shall see. So they say it's a richly detailed mid-range, and that's a very vague term. I don't know what that means. What does richly detailed mean? In comparison, we have the 700, if this webpage will load. The HD700 is a warmer headphone. At least that's what Sennheiser says. It in fact says it's dynamic stereo headphones promises outstanding soundstage with a warm and balanced audio reproduction. Paired with specially tuned, highly efficient drivers capable of delivering high sound pressure levels, immense audio enjoyment is available at your fingertips. Okay. So neither of these two companies actually provide legitimate information that could be helpful in deciding which one of these two does what you think it does, right? And you don't know what it does. You richly detailed mids, that's what Beyerdynamic says, which is totally irrelevant because it doesn't make any sense. And Sennheiser says warm and balanced, and I don't know what that means. What do you mean warm and balanced? Either it's warm or it's balanced. Either it's neutral or it's not. I don't know what they mean by warm and balanced. Which is why we are here to test and figure out what's actually going on. So we have our test playlist. And go to my test playlist on Spotify. The link is down in the description if you want to follow. I've got 2 more followers on the test playlist, which is great. Today, we are testing 3 songs here. Want You Back by Haim, Heartbreak by Chris Serro, and Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland. So why don't we start off with number 1, which is the HD700. I have that plugged into the Mytek Brooklyn DAC Plus that is connected to an AB switch. And right now we are switched to the HD700. So let's get started. Here we go with Want You Back. The volume is currently negative 44. I'm going to increase to about negative 30. And at negative 30, it's comfortable listening volume. I can still hear myself talking, but I hear everything, every nuance in the song. Excellent separation of the vocals. Supremely excellent. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 25. The primary vocalist voice is smooth. I wouldn't say it's intimate. There's a lot of air in the vocals, but it's not anemic sounding. It's dead center. And I could hear the 2 backup vocalists in the background, several steps behind, left and right. They both have their own tonality. So all 3 have different tonalities, and that's being represented quite effectively in this headphone. The drum is not interfering with their mids at all, because the bass is rather rolled off on the 700. So when the drum strikes occur, that doesn't distort the mids at all. Now, there's a slight hint of potential sibilance with the primary vocalist. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 15 and try to find that. Yeah. At negative 15 decibels, the primary vocalist sibilance becomes ever more prevalent. For me, it's not too much, right? It's not as if I can't listen to it, but I can feel that energy. It's just underneath my threshold. And for some people, it'll be over their threshold. Let's go back real quick and listen to the first few seconds of the song, because I want to hear that micro detail when she drags out the letter W when she says we. She goes, we. It's very gravelly. And I want to know whether the 700s are able to reproduce that graveliness. And it comes around, I think, 5 seconds of this song or so, 5 to 8 seconds. So let's listen for it. Here we go. Yeah, it's clearly audible at negative 22 decibels, which is very comfortable listening volume. Let me take it back down to negative 32 and listen for it again and see if it's as obvious, or you have to actually pump more power into the headphones to get it. Okay, here we go. Right now, negative 32 decibels. Nope, it's still there. The only difference between the two volume sections, negative 32 and I think negative, whatever it was, I forget now, negative 20 something or another, negative 25, is that it's just a little bit louder at the higher volume. That's it. The detail is still there. It's about the same amount of detail. I can't tell the difference between the detail. I can only tell the difference that it's louder. Overall, I find that the HD700's representation of the song is kind of unique. It's interesting because the 700s have a lot of air and good amount of separation. I mean, excellent separation. It's so good that you can hear the backup vocalist independently. So backup vocalist 1 has her own tonality, backup vocalist 2 has her own tonality, and then you have the primary vocalist. And all three of them, when they're singing together, you can just close your eyes and you can hear the nuanced differences amongst those three. Now, they're trying to stay in tune, but it's not that easy to stay in tune with somebody else. Your own vocal cords, your training, everything involved with you as an individual is a factor which leads you away from being absolutely 100% in tune with another singer. And so you can hear the slight delay between them, the backup vocalist. You can hear the slight tonal changes between them as they sing. One takes a breath just a little bit faster than the other one as they're changing to the next set of lyrics. I mean, it's really fun to experience that. So that's number one. Number two is that even with all that air and separation, the primary vocalist still sounds rather warm. And by warm, I mean her tonality doesn't sound anemic. It doesn't sound flat. It doesn't sound like there's a curve, like a U shape. Oftentimes, people talk about the mids have a U shape in the frequency chart. What they're talking about is you have the bass, and then all of a sudden, around the midsection, there's a slight dip or a huge dip, depending on the headphone. A dip where the mids are, and then it comes right back up to where the treble is, the treble range. And that U shape, as you see it, you can call it V shape, you can call it U shape, whatever. Where that U shape is a receding of the mid frequencies. How does that translate? Well, that means that when you listen to a song that has vocals in it, they're going to be less prevalent, and the other frequencies are going to take precedent over the mids. In other words, let's say you have a pop song and you're listening to it with a headphone that has a U shape in the mid. What happens is the drum and the treble instruments are going to overpower the mids, and you're going to have a harder time finding the mids. The HD700 is not that type of headphone. In fact, I would say there's a slight increase in the mids, just enough so that the primary vocalist stands out, the backup vocalists stand out. The rolled off bass certainly is a huge contributor to making sure that I get that clarity and that warmth. That rolled off bass basically allows the mids to get bumped up just a bit more so they come out easier, more clearly. Then there's also the treble energy, which is problematic for some, especially if you keep pumping volume into these headphones. For me, just underneath my threshold. Other people, they may find it to be a real distraction. Okay, so let's switch headphones real quick. All right, we've got the 1990, and we're going to restart this song. Here we go. Interestingly enough, the sibilance seems to be about the same or very similar with the primary vocalist. Currently at negative 31 decibels. I'm going to increase to negative 25. Still not loud enough. Going to increase to negative 18. Much warmer sounding, much more closed off is what I mean. There's a lot less air with the 1990. And the separation of the vocalist is not as good as there is on the 700. That closed off nature melds their frequencies. Now, you can still hear the separation amongst the backup vocalists, but it's not quite the same because their tonalities actually meld. And it's harder to hear the separate tonalities. The bass is slightly more bumped up on the 1990 than on the 700. So that starts to kind of interfere just a little bit with the mids. Not a whole lot, but just enough so that there's not that hard line separation between the bass and the mid frequencies. I'm going to try to increase the volume and see how sibilant these things get. Now we're at negative 10, and that's very loud. And it's not particularly sibilant at that high volume, but I can feel that energy. Is it the same type of energy as on the 700? Not quite. And the reason I say not quite is because the 700 simply has much more air in the presentation. And when it has that much more air in the presentation, it doesn't sound as closed off, and so it sounds more clinical to my ear. So it's more ear piercing, or it could get more ear piercing than the 1990. But as you increase the volume on the 1990, you start hearing a bit more of the melding of the frequencies, just a little bit. The bass becomes a bit too muddled with the mids in comparison to the 700. And that sibilance, even though it doesn't quite get bad for me, I can feel that energy. It's probably less energy than on the 700, but we're talking about really minute differences, if at all any, depending on what you are listening to, the amplifier you're using, the type of ears you have, all sorts of other factors may be involved. And I don't think for sibilance regarding the mids, I don't think there's really a huge difference between the two. The biggest difference, as it was last time, is just the amount of air and detail that you get. Now, I could hear the differences in the tonalities on the 1990, but it wasn't as easy because there's no hardline separation amongst the vocalists. So by hardline separation, I mean you have the primary vocalist, you know her tonality. Then you have backup vocalist 1, and then you have backup vocalist 2. And those two backup vocalists have their own separate tonalities. You can hear them. It's very easy to hear them if you just close your eyes and you sit back and just listen. Clearly audible. With the 1990, however, you can hear the primary vocalist, that's fine, but her mids kind of get bumped up and mixed up a little bit with the bass. Then you have the two backup vocalists. You can hear the two backup vocalists separate from the primary vocalist. But when you compare the two backup vocalists against each other, number 1 and number 2, their vocals blend, and it becomes harder to hear that separation. So there's no hardline separation between 1 and 2 in the 1990. You can still pick out the slight differences in their tonalities every once in a while, but it's not as clean or clear or distinct as it was on the 700. Overall, which one is a more clinical, which one is a more warm presentation? I'd say that it's the 1990 that has the more warm presentation because it's a more closed-off headphone. It's a semi-open back versus an open back like the HD700. And the slight boost in the bass kind of negates whatever boost there is in the mids, if there is a boost in the mids on the 1990. And the slight boost in the bass kind of just melds it too much. Whereas with the 700, the mids are just, they are pushed up, the bass is pushed down, and then you have obviously the slight treble spikes here and there. Okay, so let's switch back to the 700. All right, we've got the 700 back, and we are now moving to Heartbreak by Chris Saro. And the thing about Heartbreak is that this is a song whose mids are recessed on purpose in the mix, okay? here's what that means. You have the electronic and the bass mumbo jumbo that's already mixed into this song. When everything is playing, all the instruments plus the vocalists take a backstage, and it's really hard to hear them. That's how this song is mixed. But you should be able to still hear them. There are units like the Mojo and the i5 Black Label that make it difficult to hear anything because they're just so bumped up in the bass. There are headphones that also do the same thing. They're really hard to listen, like, a cheaper headphone like a Beats headphone. They're not cheap, but a Beats headphone or a cheap Sony headphone or any mass-produced headphones that have a bumped-up bass. They will end up just distorting the mids considerably in a song like Heartbreak. So let's see how these two headphones actually represent the song. Let us start with the 700. Here we go. No sibilance at all. I'm going to increase the volume. It was negative 28. I'm going to increase to negative 25. Excellent air. Huge soundstage, like for days. It's like you're standing outside. It's just free after being in a straitjacket. Like the 1990, you put these on, and it just feels like the straitjacket is taken off of you. It's like being swaddled and then not swaddled. You can hear the different vocalists here, absolutely clear, distinct differences in their tonalities, hard line differences. I'm going to increase the volume again to negative 20. And negative 20 is the volume I would probably listen at maximum on this song. I can barely hear myself talk. And now here comes the entire mix. You have the bass and the vocalist, and it's hard to hear the mids with everything playing, and it sounds a little, it doesn't sound distorted, but it definitely sounds muffled. The problem with this song, as I said originally, is that the mids are purposefully recessed in the mix, and the bass is bumped up. Now, the 700, as we said, doesn't have increased bass. So what is the reason I'm listening to muffled midtones here? I don't know. I think I don't know how to explain it right now. When the bass is not playing, they are absolutely crystal clear. And even with just the regular bass, just the drum playing and their vocals, like right now, absolutely clear. But when you get the bass guitar mixed in and the electric guitar comes in, it starts adding a bit too much muffledness to the song. Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Okay, so I think I figured it out. So let's go back. We're at 2:26 right now. Let's go back to 2 minutes and 10 seconds, about halfway in this song. And here's my hypothesis. My hypothesis is the reason that the song gets muddled, the mids get muddled, is not because of the bass. Because when the bass is playing by itself, it's just the drum and the vocalist. I can hear the vocalist absolutely clearly. But when the electric guitar comes in, you get that treble energy. All of a sudden, the vocals sound muddy. They don't sound distorted. They just sound muted, like they're just overcome by something else. Like you put a bed sheet or something on top, and you're really trying to listen to the vocals, and you can't. So let's start back at 2:10, and let's listen very carefully to try to determine if my hypothesis is correct. Here we go. Yeah. So with the guitar, the electric guitar, playing at full blast, it overwhelms the mids on this song. Let's go back a little bit further to about 1 minute and 58 seconds or so, when the drum and the vocals are the only thing playing, not the electric guitar. Absolutely clear. Absolutely clear. With the drums playing, with the bass guitar, I think, strumming, the mids are clear. But when that electric guitar comes in with that high-pitched sound, it drowns out the mids. Okay, now let's switch to the 1990. Okay, we have the 1990 on, and let's start on again. Here we go. Much more warm presentation, but that should be no surprise at this point. Much less air, again, not a surprise. The electric guitar that's playing right now seems to have a much softer presentation than on the 700. I can hear the differences amongst the vocalists right now, but it's by no means the same as it was presented on the 700. The 700, definitely you could tell there are multiple vocalists. And on the 1990, the distinction between the vocalists is, I think, demonstrably less articulate, meaning it's not easy to separate their tonalities. They're melding too much in comparison to the 700. And here comes the electric guitar. The electric guitar sounds perfectly soft right now. I'm going to increase the negative 14. And at negative 14 decibels, I can feel that treble energy getting really, really peaky. So on this song, a negative 14 decibel, that electric guitar is just, too much for me. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to about 1 minute and 50 seconds. Listen for the drum and the vocals, and then listen also to how the vocals respond to the electric guitar jumping in. And I'm going to increase the volume to negative 21. Here we go. The vocals are audible with just the bass guitar playing, strumming. The drums, when they come in, they start bumping up against the mid, so it's harder to hear them, the mids with the drum playing. And now here comes the electric guitar. And it's muffled again. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 17. Yeah, it's muffled again. So the muffling is the muffling. Like, it sounds... I can't tell the difference between the muffling, right? I can't say that the 700 is less muffled or more muffled. I can't say. All I can say is they're both muffled. And they're both muffled for different reasons. So with the 1990, the muffling comes from that increased bass, just a slight increase of the bass. Remember when I said the 700, when the drum is playing, when the bass guitar is playing, and the vocals are in, no electric guitar playing, the vocals are clear, crystal clear, no doubt about it. In comparison, the 1990, with the bass guitar, the drum, and the vocals are harder to listen to, harder to hear. Because that bass starts bumping up against it. It's like standing shoulder to shoulder on the subway, and you're kind of nudging each other to try to get yourself to the exit door. You know, everybody's kind of shuffling and kind of pushing. That's how it feels a little bit when you have the 1990 listening to this song. Then, on top of that, you've got that trebly energy with the electric guitar. Again, the same thing with the 700, but the difference is with the 1990, because it's a more closed-off headphone, it kind of squishes the frequency together, or it feels like it does, because it's a much more closed experience. And that's why you're getting the muffled sound signature. So they're twofold. The treble spike, the bumped up bass, and, you know, those two things combined with the closed off nature of the headphones presents the mids in a muffled way on this song. Whereas on the 700, I think the muffled experience comes mostly, if not only, from that high treble. And that treble just kind of overpowers everything, and it just kind of overwhelms it, and it makes me feel as if it makes it sound as if it's being muffled. So in either case, I think there's a muffling going on, just with different ways of doing it. All right, so let's switch back to the 700. Okay, now we got the 700 on our head. And now we're going to Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland. If you've never heard Orla Gartland's song, take a listen. It's on Spotify, obviously. Why Am I Like This? She has an acoustic guitar and then her vocal. That's how the song starts out. Then you get the drum in, you get a little bit of piano and all that. But it's a relatively simple song. The reason we use Why Am I Like This is because it is that simple, especially at the beginning, where you start to hear whether you can actually get the detail of a person's vocals without other things melding in. No electric boogaloo nonsense, no unnecessary bass guitar, no unnecessary bumped up, unnecessary drum kit playing at the very beginning to give tempo. It's just the guitar, an acoustic guitar, and her. And now how do we get those two mixed in? How will these two headphones represent that type of sound signature? All right, so let's start. We've got the 700 on our head. Here we go. The bass or the acoustic guitar is clear, absolutely clear. Not reverberate. There's no lingering reverberation. It's a very fast decay of the frequency. Her voice is crystal clear. It's like you have a fogged up window in your car, a windshield, and you clean it off, and all of a sudden you see everything. That's how precise the 700 sounds. Very smooth response, but I can feel the energy in her voice. So I'm going to increase the volume. We're negative 15 now. I'm going to increase it to negative 10 and see if I can get the sibilance out of it. Yeah, there's definitely treble energy there at negative 10 decibels, but it's still controlled. And I'm like, if I'm afraid of going any higher in the volume because it'll hurt my ears. So I'm going to bring the volume down to negative 20. Even with the bass guitar now that comes in later, it's just strumming real quick. No disturbance whatsoever with her vocal. Absolutely crystal clear, separated from her. This is if you wanted to hear a song and you want to hear how an individual acoustics sound, this is a great song to listen to find out if your headphones can in fact give you crystal clear mids. Play the song and then put on your whatever headphones that you have. And if you say to yourself, I'm missing out on a couple of words, or I'm not quite sure I heard the tonality, or I think I heard a detail and I can't figure it out, then imagine that. And then the contrary to that is the 700, which has every little detail you can imagine coming out. Now, yes, the degree of detail is going to be different between the 700 and the 800S. Okay, let me just put it that way. The 800S is the king of detail, bar none. However, the 700, the way that it presents this detail, the mids, is clear, undistorted, not muffled at all throughout the playing of the song. Whether it's the acoustic guitar or it's just that, the bass guitar that comes in just strumming very, very shortly and near the middle of the song, it's just clear. I have no other way of describing other than to say the detail is absolutely present. You will not hear any sort of distortion at all. So now let's switch to the 1990. Got the 1990 on my head, and let's restart. Here we go. Warmer experience, more closed off. The guitar doesn't have as much air, so there's slightly more lingering transients, reverberation in the guitar frequency. It's very, very slight, I have to be honest, but it's there. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 13. We were at negative 18 before. I can hear the energy in her voice. She's very clear, no doubt that her vocals come out very clearly. But less air in her vocals. Now with the bass guitar playing, and there's a little bit of drum, very lightly playing. Still, her voice is very clear. That bass guitar is not interfering with her voice at all. But it's definitely more present. It has more body to it than it did on the 700, the bass guitar. I'm going to increase the volume to see when it gets sibilant. -5. And -5 is where I'm maxing out the Mytek deck, almost maxing it out. And that's very, very loud. And at that volume, you start hearing the sibilance in her voice, and it's probably a little too much. Otherwise, I hear no muffled nature to her voice. It's just not as distinctly clear as the 700. Now, what do I mean by that? You get the 700 and you have its very clear tonality, hard separation, as I said before. And you have the 1990, and the bass kind of just a little bit bumps up against it. No hard separation. The reason I say that is because there's not as much air. There's definitely not as much air in the 1990 as there is in the 700. And so when you compare the two, you can hear that there's a definite change in tonality. Okay, so let's stop. On this song, they both sound really good. If you want hyper detail, if you want to hear just the vocals crystal clear, the 700, bar none. I mean, that hands down. But if you want to hear just a bit more in the bass response, you want to hear a little bit more warmth in the vocals than the 1990. Because it does kind of bump up shoulders a little bit with the other frequencies. And, they're like, hey, let's go arm in arm, down down the train and out of the door. We'll walk out together, essentially is what the 1990 is saying. Whereas the 700 is saying, nah, step back, the vocals go first, you guys come after me. That's the way I would explain it. It's just the 700's presentation of the vocal is, in actuality, in practice, discernibly more clear than on the 1990, on this song. All right, so let's talk about conclusion. This was a little bit longer video than I had intended, but I think that it does, in fact, present you two unique sound signatures, different sound signatures. If you're looking for something that's more analytical than the 700, there's no doubt, because of that air that it provides, crystal clear separation amongst the instruments, the multiple vocalists, very clear distinction amongst their tonalities. The only issue that I have was with the second song that we listened to, Heartbreak. But I already told you before we started that song, the Heartbreak already has that U-shaped stuff going on in the mix. But it was muffled on both headphones. Different reasons, in my opinion, why the song was muffled on either headphone, but muffled nonetheless. Of course, I would assume that if that song was mixed in normally, like the mids were not recessed, when everything is playing, then I would suspect that the 700 would probably have better resolution than the 1990. But that's only conjecture. The other two songs, Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This and Want You Back by Haim, I think the 700, without any hesitation, I would say, has better resolution, meaning more clear, has more separation amongst the multiple instruments, multiple vocalists, and it just sounds more airy, more open, more free overall. The 1990 presents a more closed-off experience, more warm experience, and I would say it's almost like listening to the THX desktop versus the Mojo, where you had two different tonalities. One is more lean, it's more clear, it's more precise, and you have the Mojo, which is more, I was going to say analog, but much more warm sounding unit. Same thing here. The 700, much more clear, much more precise. The 1990, more warm. Which begs the question that maybe the marketing for the 1990 isn't exactly what they say it is, right? The experience is different from the marketing, in other words, because the 1990 is supposed to be great for mixing and mastering, but if it's not really producing, right, if it's not giving you the hyper detail, and if it's not giving you the hard separation, and you don't have the air in the soundstage, everything is just average, what are you paying $600 for? I mean, I'm just asking. Whereas with the HD700, you can buy that now refurbished for about $350. In fact, that's how much I paid. I paid for refurbished, almost, it's brand new essentially because they refurbished it. I paid $325, I think. And for a price like that, I cannot imagine anybody wanting to pick up the 1990 over the 700 if now hold on, if you're looking for hyper detail and clarity and you have a set budget, no more than 600. Then between the two, I think the decision should be fairly obvious, which is the 700, if that's the sound signature you're going for. And not only do you get better sound signature in that respect, more clarity, more differentiation amongst instruments, things like that, but you get it for substantially less than you would for the 1990. Just my opinion. I hope that this has been of some help to anybody who is thinking about buying either the 700 or the 1990. They're both very good headphones for what they do. They both have different tonalities. But if you were under the impression that they both compare equally, I think that's probably not accurate. Now, we're still going through the testing phase. We're going to talk about the treble maybe tomorrow or the day after, and then I can give you a full conclusion based upon my testing, what I think. But I think at this point, I would be fine saying that the 700 and the 1990 are not comparable headphones in sound character. They have different sound characters. You may like them. You may dislike them. I don't know. It's totally up to you and what you're looking for. If you enjoy my content, if you like watching, listening to what I do, then I hope that you might consider donating to me a couple of bucks a month on Patreon. I currently have 6 very giving, generous, wonderful patrons who give me a little bit of their money, hard-earned money, once a month, every month, and I truly appreciate them and thank them for doing that. With their support, I'm able to keep this channel going. I'm able to keep saving up money to buy new gear so that I can review that gear for you. I'm not like any other reviewer. I don't just take a piece of equipment that companies hand out and wink and a nod, walk them through a kind of haphazard, semi-detailed review. I do my thorough reviews, and I take my time. And the reason I do that is because I think that consumers deserve better. And so if you find this to be useful, then please do consider donating to me just a couple of bucks a month on Patreon. If you have watched this video and you like the content, then hey, please consider subscribing. I love getting new notifications every day that I've got a new subscriber. We're well over 440, and I want to get to that 500 mark as soon as I possibly can, because that'll be a huge milestone for my channel. If you have any requests for reviews based upon the equipment that I have, then please look at the description section below. You can use the review request form on my Google Drive, submit that, and I'll get to your review as soon as I can. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Other than that, I hope that you all have a wonderful remainder of your weekend. Take care.